Welcome and thank you for standing by. At this time, all parties are on a listen-only mode until the question and answer session of today's conference. At that time, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1. Today's conference is also being recorded. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. I would now like to turn the meeting over to Robin Madsen. You may begin.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this webinar on GASB 6768 and the initiation of our audit process for fiscal year 14-15, of which many of you will be participants. We have had a keen interest in this webinar, so I wanted to let people know from the get-go that we will be doing a second webinar sometime over the next 2 weeks. So to anyone who has had contact from someone else who was trying to get in and hasn't been able to, we understand that there has been more appetite than we had nodes provided for, so we will be doing this a second time. The other thing is that these slides will be posted at our CalSTRS.com website, and we hope to do that by the end of the week. So I wanted to let you know that the actual slides will be made available to you in the aftermath of the conference. As the operator mentioned, we will have question and answer sections of the presentation. Those are spaced within the logical break in the presentation between topics. We're going to talk about an overview of GASB 6768. We're going to talk about some of the employer tools that CalSTRS has provided. And then I'm going to turn it over to Brenda Torres, a partner with Crowe Horwath, who's going to talk about the actual employer audit process as it relates to the external audit for CalSTRS financial statements. So I want to make sure that we all understand those components of this webinar. And there are question breaks within each of those sections so that you have the opportunity to enter into the dialogue. We will all ask that you think through your questions in terms of their applicability to others. If they are very specific about your circumstances, we would appreciate it if you would email the CalSTRS GASB project email address that will be at the end of this presentation. Has also been communicated with to many of you through letters. So the other place that we use for communication, primary communication with our employer community, is the Secure Employer website announcements phase. So as you're needing additional information, as we publish a date for the next webinar, that's where we will be putting information as well as through other channels. So again, my name is Robin Madsen, and I'm honored to be CalSTRS CFO. I'm going to take the part of the presentation that provides an overview of GASB 6768, the employer tools, and questions on those two topics. Brenda Torres will do the second part on their background information on employer audits, how districts were selected for audit, what the process will be like in terms of working with them to help them perform their audit for us. So again, their effort is focused on CalSTRS audit, the audit of CalSTRS 14-15 financial statements. So we're already in the process for the audit of this year's financials. Okay, in terms of the GASB standards, I'm sure many of you know that GASB is an independent not-for-profit organization that sets standards for accounting in the public sector. They have come out with 2 new standards, the first of which is GASB 67, which was effective for pension plans such as CalSTRS last fiscal year. So we are in our second year of the implementation of these standards. For employers, of which we are also an employer, we are looking at the first year of implementation for GASB statement number 68, which provides new standards for reporting for employers who offer pension benefits through certain kind of pension plans. So that's actually effective for this fiscal year for CalSTRS as an employer and for our school employers, you who are joining us in this webinar. In terms of the changes that GASB 68 requires all of us to make as employers, is we need to report our proportionate share of the pension plan that we provide to our employees, net pension liability, and we include that as a liability item on our balance sheet in the fiscal year 14-15 financial statements. So the other thing that's implemented with this change, so we're calculating a net pension liability. We actually published that for CalSTRS in our fiscal year 13-14 financial statements. And to the extent that there is a net pension liability, employers need to take their proportionate share of that liability and book it on their balance sheet. This is a new reporting requirement. This liability wasn't reported in this way previously, so it is a change for us. It effectively separates accounting for pension system funding and the liability associated with that. So we no longer have a parallel number from the actuarial perspective and from the accounting perspective. They're calculated differently. They come up with different results. They have different assumptions. So it's important to know that what we report for financial reporting purposes is not consistent with what people are used to seeing in the actuarial liability calculations previously. So as we have presented to our board, and I'm sure as you will have questions from your stakeholders, the numbers they're seeing now are different because the calculations are in fact different. The methodology is different. The other thing the standards do is instead of having the pension expense limited to the actual contributions required for a particular fiscal year, the GASB 68 statement requires that we report pension expense as the change to the net pension liability from year to year, adjusted for certain items that are deferred. So it's a different calculation for the pension expense. It's not based on contributions anymore. In addition, we have changes to the amortization requirements for the differences between assumptions and actual results. And we have a significant number of new notes disclosures that we need to make as employers. So again, the intention from GASB's perspective was to create more transparency into the obligations for deferred benefits that are incurred by employers as they enter into the employment exchange. So the concept here is that the contract we're making with our employees for future benefits needs to be disclosed in terms of our financial reporting, balance sheet, and income statement items as that transaction occurs. So it was effectively an off-balance sheet liability, and it's now moving to an on-balance sheet liability. So we always had the obligation. It's just that these standards now require us to report it in a way that the standard-setting organization and the stakeholders that they're serving have determined is more useful to readers or constituents of ours. So that's really the reasoning behind this change. Now, in terms of the communication impacts of the change, as we have experienced as a plan, as you may have already experienced or will experience, it has a tendency, this change has a tendency to create confusion among the stakeholder community because there is a difference between what is required from a funding perspective for pensions and what is required from a financial reporting perspective for pensions. Probably the near-term impact is that as rating agencies, bond rating agencies, credit rating agencies look at your financial statements, they're going to see something different than they saw before, and it's probably going to be, there will be a larger liability, and so it could potentially have an impact on the kind of interest rate you get for borrowing. So that is the tangible impact that we might anticipate that you will see. So it's important if you have a large treasury operation or you're part of a county with a large treasury operation that you're aware of the potential impact of this on the kind of rating you get for bonds you might be issuing and then the consequential interest rate as it will impact your budget process from a cash perspective. Now, what I have next are the actual results of the CalSTRS State Teachers Retirement Plan calculations for fiscal year 2013-14. These results are captured here, but they're also published in our comprehensive annual financial report and in our financial statements. Both of those documents are available on our website at calstrs.com. So what you have here are extracts from that reporting. This first slide is something that we present on page 58 of our comprehensive annual financial report. So it is embedded within our financial statement. It is actually a part of our Note 3. So again, to the point that you want to set this in context, that's where you can find it in the body of the financial statements. What this is showing is that the total pension liability for the state teachers' retirement plan is $248,911,000,000, And the net pension liability is that number reduced by the value of the assets we are currently holding in trust for the plan. So that net number is $58,437,000. So, no, I did that wrong. $58,437,000,000. Sorry, order of magnitude here. So the amount in trust is not, we are not 100% funded from a net pension liability perspective. We do have an unfunded portion of this net pension liability. That ratio is 77%. So what is covered is 77% of the full liability. In order to calculate the net pension liability, we actually used our valuation, so our funding valuation, from 6/30/2013. So we do actuarial evaluations each year in April of the subsequent calendar year. So we will be doing an actuarial evaluation for 6/30/2014, and that will be presented to our board in April of 15. Our board adopted assumptions for this valuation that are similar to the assumptions that are used in determining the actual actuarial valuation for a defined benefit program. There is an actual board resolution that adopted those assumptions. In our assumptions, we used an assumed investment rate of return for discounting purposes of 7.6%. That is different than the assumed rate of return for funding purposes, which is 7.5%, because it is gross of administrative expenses, which again is one of those changes in methodology that GASB provided for in issuing these new standards. So this is an illustration of one of those differences that causes the numbers to shift from the funding perspective to the accounting perspective. The reason that I point out the actuarial valuation timeline is because GASB provides for, in Statement 67, a look-back period for employers. So you are in a position where you can use the results from CalSTRS fiscal year 13-14 financial statements to prepare your fiscal year 14-15 results. So you do not need to wait for us to issue our 14-15 numbers before you prepare your 14-15 numbers, which may, if you chose to do that, there might be a timing problem for you. So GASB did provide for an overlap, and you are authorized under the standards to use the NPL that we calculated at the end of 2013 and 14. So what this slide shows is that look-back timeline. You can make a decision. You could wait for our fiscal year 14-15 numbers. That is also allowable under GASB. But what GASB has stipulated is once you make the decision as to what your look-back period is going to be, you need to stick to it. So you can't use the current year some of the time and the prior year some of the other time without restating values. So just so you know that both are allowable, but once you have made that decision, you need to stick with it to avoid restatement. The next thing I'm going to talk about are the AICPA recommendations around what plans were to do. And I will let you know that CalSTRS and CalPERS have taken different approaches to this. So again, what we're talking about here are the CalSTRS statements, the information you're going to receive from CalPERS, which in fact you're lucky to know that we are also going to be recipients of that information because our employees, our CalPERS employees, is going to be presented in a different form sometime this spring. I understand that there will be a fee for the information from CalPERS. I don't believe they have publicized that yet, but that is my understanding. We are not charging a fee, and the information, if you want to use our 13-14 results, is already available to you through our comprehensive annual financial report. So what the AICPA recommended and CalSTRS adopted with the permission of the board, because we needed to demonstrate to the board that this was within our fiduciary responsibility, and that is what we were able to do, because we don't have an ongoing relationship with you as employers for administrative billing, we determined that it would be more expensive for us to charge you than it would be to just do it. So I want you to understand that nuance, because CalPERS is in a different situation where they already have an administrative billing relationship for actuarial services. And so that is why, or one of the reasons, that there is a difference between CalPERS and CalSTRS in terms of how we're handling this. So what we did, and again I'll point you to the actual pages within the the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So this is beginning on page 93. The superintendent of your district should have received a letter from me with this packet of information attached. But what we did was we provided a schedule of proportionate share. So we determined, based on our accounting of your incoming contributions for fiscal year 13-14, the proportionate share those contributions constituted of all the contributions we received, in conjunction with the contributions we received from the state of California, which is the largest contributor. So we divided up the remainder among our employers based on the contributions due and received for prior periods during fiscal year 13-14. And that information is published beginning on page 93 of the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. So our allocation methodology was based on current contributions. You do not need to adopt that as your policy. You could choose, based on policy that you set at your board level, to use a different method. But what we wanted to do was provide you with the information using a method that we could, in fact, implement. And so what we did was use current contributions due, and then to the extent that there were adjustments from prior periods, those are also included. And again, GASB provides you alternatives in terms of how you want to calculate this. It's something that you'll want to talk about internally and perhaps with your auditors, actuaries, attorneys, other interested parties. But I wanted to let you know that this information is available for you. We did ask our auditors, Crow, to give you an opinion on this schedule, because to the extent that you do use it, your auditors are probably wanting to know that it has been reviewed for accuracy and completeness by our auditors, so that's why you'll see the audit opinion in there. It is the audit of this particular schedule was done at a very different level of materiality than is used for CalSTRS financial statements as a whole, so that's why you see the separate opinion. And I'm really focusing on the schedule of proportionate share, but this also applies to the schedule, what we call Schedule 10, which is not the proportionate share, but the actual schedule of the pension, the aggregate pension amounts for employers and non-employer contributing entities. So this is where you would find your pension expense, deferred inflows and outflows, as well as a restatement of the net pension liability. So you'll see that, and that schedule is on page 127 of our Comprehensive Annual Financial Report. Following that schedule, you'll see notes that apply to both the schedule of proportionate share as well as this aggregate schedule of pension amounts. And the reference from the audit perspective are on the slide that was previously displayed. So that shows you reference to AICPA white papers that indicated, and interpretations that indicated what the AICPA was recommending that plans do and how that information might be useful to employers. So I went out.
Robin?
Yes.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. This is Brenda from Crow Horwath. I thought it might make sense, based on the information that you provided and the detail that you provided about the differences in the opinions, just to provide a little bit more insight. When you look at Crow's opinion on the schedule of proportionate share as well as the schedule of aggregate pension amounts, please note that the opinion on the schedule of proportionate share is a schedule as a whole. But for the schedule of the aggregate pension amounts, it's actually an opinion on each of the elements noted within that schedule. And that was suggested by the white papers that Robin is referencing, which should provide you as management assurance as well as your auditor's assurance with respect to those numbers.
Thank you, Brenda. I appreciate that. So, again, from your perspective as employers, hopefully we have given you things you may choose to use that will have the appropriate level of assurance for you, your stakeholders, and your auditors should they require this information from you. What we have next are some samples of these blown up. So these are actually taken from the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report pages, but we've put them together as slides here, although they're small, to give you some idea of what is displayed. The first one on the schedule of proportionate share of contributions really looks at the end of that schedule, and the reason this is important is not because we want to talk about particular employers, but because you'll notice here there's a total for employers, and then there's the next line is the total of the state contributions. So that number for the state contributions is not the state as an employer, but the state as a non-employer contributing entity. So again, you'll see there that they have more than 37% of the contributions coming into the plan. So, and then you'll also see that there are certain contributions that we get from you that are to finance separate liabilities. So some employers purchase retirement incentives. And so there are contributions that we receive for those retirement incentives. Those are not included in the percentages calculated because they are specific to certain members or certain groups of members. You'll also see an adjustment for contributions that are used to fund our post-employment benefit for the Medi-Cal Premium Payment Program. So again, that's an adjustment from the whole to get us back to the numbers on the face of our financial statements that report contribution revenue in total. So that's how we reconcile back. The next slide gives an overview of those aggregate pension amounts, and you'll see here we're starting with the net pension liability. We show the change. We show items subject to amortization, so deferral items, and then we get to the pension expense. We also show the deferred inflows of resources, which we have here on actual earnings as they're either adjusted out for assumptions or added back in for the retirement of amortization. So those are your deferred inflows and outflows that make up a component of the change in net pension liability from year to year. In previous presentations, we've had questions about, well, how do I use this data? One way you could choose to use this data, the simplistic way, is if you accept the proportionate share that we're attributing to you, which includes accruals. So we do accruals because reporting is delayed. We do not receive your June 30th reporting until August 15th. Those are the requirements. There's a 45-day lag. So we accrue for both June and May contributions and any other missing files. So if you accept that our accruals are a good representation of your contributions, you could take your proportionate share and multiply these numbers by that proportion, and that would create the components of your entry. That's a simplistic way to look at this. So that's not what you have to do, but it is an option for you. And then this next slide shows the remainder of that schedule, which is a full page long in our comprehensive annual financial report. So now's the time where I want to open it up for questions. I know that was a lot of information, and I'm happy to address any questions you might have on any of it.
All right, and if you do have any questions, you may press star 1 at this time. Be sure to unmute your line and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Your name is required to introduce your question. Once again, if you have any questions, please press star 1 at this time. One moment to see if we have any questions come up in queue. And at this time, I am showing no questions.
Okay, so we'll move on. So what I'm going to go to next are the tools that we have provided, and basically the access to these tools is through what we call our contribution account portal. which is a subset of the Secure Employer website. So this is the website that you or your county office of education would use to submit contribution and reporting file information.
Excuse me, this is the operator. We actually did have a late question come in.
Okay, sure.
One moment. Caller, your line is open.
Oh, hi. This is Farhad Sabit again from Aloni College. I was wondering if you would repeat that last portion of your presentation where you calculated, I believe, the net present liability for the employers, that formula.
Sure. So one of the things you might do is, let's say your proportionate share is 0.1%, a tenth of a percent. And that's not any of the data shown here. In fact, that would be a fairly large percentage. I believe our largest employer has about 5%. So this would be a tenth of a percent. What you could do if you chose to adopt all of our policies, and I want to underscore that because that is a choice, and you would need to understand that along with your stakeholders, is to take that 0.1% and multiply our NPL, deferred inflows and outflows, and pension expense numbers for the plan as a whole by a tenth of percent, and that would basically be your share. That would be the crux of your entry. Does that make sense?
I see. Okay, thank you. And then that would be, for example, the total $58 billion multiplied by that, right?
Correct.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And now I'm showing no additional questions at this time.
Okay, so in terms of the employer tools, we have developed some that are based on the results from our fiscal year 2013-14. We've added a tab called Financial Reporting, and then another tab called Reconciliation within the Contribution Account portal at the Secure Employer website. There is a job aid out there in terms of describing how you might use these tools. We are developing additional reports, so what I want to say is what you're going to see here is at a fairly macro level, so it's rolled up. And then we refer you to your variance reports for additional detail. So we produce, every time a file is submitted with your data, we produce what we call a variance report that compares your calculations to our calculations and demonstrates any differences. What we're doing and is in process right now is linking that information together. We expect that that will be available in the late spring. But what I'm showing you here is what is available now. So what you'll need to do is to get, if you do not have access to SEW, what we call the SEW, the Secure Employer website, there will be a Secure Employer website administrator within your county or within your organization, and they can provide you a link to start the registration process that will gain you access to these reports. Once you have access, you get to the Secure Employer website through CalSTRS.com, and you'll see those icons circled here. If you go in, the other icon is really about narrative information on GASB accounting changes. So here we provide you some additional background information, but the Secure Employer website is where I'm going to take you through now. So you would click on that icon that we're showing in the upper left corner of the screen, and you'll come down another layer within our website. If you click in there, you'll get to the login and get into the website. And then in there, you'll see in the left-hand navigation bar something that's called the Contribution Account Portal. If you click on that and go into the Financial Reporting tab, you can then get to what we call a reconciliation schedule. And there is a job aid for running the schedule because you can set parameters for the time frame that you want to look at. This is something that we're producing on a monthly basis, and we make it available to you on a monthly basis. It's something that counties can run for a county as an employer, and also that they can run for each or all of their reporting units. So there are different ways to access it. Access is restricted to the data that's associated with you as an employer, or for a county for employers that are within the county's jurisdiction. So it is controlled that way. You can't go in and see somebody else's data. They can't go in and see your data. So I just wanted to provide that assurance. And again, there is a job aid for the new schedules so that you can have, again, detailed instructions in terms of how to use them. The job aids are filed within a structure there for use by what we call a reporting source, which is the county, or a reporting unit, which is the employer. The job aid itself talks about how you get to these tools and then what they present back to you in terms of information. This slide shows the actual reconciliation schedule that you could run, and what it's based on are the files that you send. So what's listed here are the names of the files that you send. Now, you may not be familiar with those names because they may be being transmitted by somebody at the county level, but that's how we relate data that we have in our systems back to data that you've submitted to us, is with what we call a media ID. So there is someone within the organizations that you work within that will understand the media ID and can help you perhaps decode that by reporting period. Again, as we move forward and develop more detailed reports, we will help translate that information for you more effectively, but in our initial presentation, that's what we're using. So you'll see a list of those transmissions that's broken down by employer. So we will have one for each employer. And then you'll see the total of the employer contributions. You'll see the reversal of an accrual from a prior period, because, again, remember, there's a gap in what you report to us and our cutoff dates, and so we make an accrual. So in the subsequent year, we have to reverse that accrual, and then we accrue further in that new fiscal year. So you'll see those adjustments. You can isolate the accruals. You might use that information to think about, well, the differences with your own reporting system or your own record keeping. But we do let you know what that information is. We also have staff who can assist you in looking at this if you're having trouble understanding it. After you've accessed the job aid, if you're still unable to understand it, we can get you that information. As we hear from you and people are using these reports, we all know they'll get better over time because we'll use them more and more. Like I said, we do have another wave coming out already based on our own experiences for a year, but we'll continue to refine them. So any questions about those tools? So I just got a reminder from one of my staff in the room to say that we know there are people who have had trouble printing the employer reconciliation report, and our recommendation is that you save the file as a PDF first and then print from the PDF. So if you want to use that reconciliation report in printed form, that's the best way to do it. Troy, any questions?
I'm showing no questions at this time.
Okay. So at this point, so is there a question from Tulare County? Okay, so at this point, I'm going to hand it over to Brenda Torres from Crow Horwath. And again, just a reminder for context, Crow is the auditor that CalSTRS has hired to audit our financial statements. The work that Crow is going to talk about is work associated with the audit of our fiscal year 14-15 financial statements. So I know it's only January, but we're already in the audit. With no further introduction, I'll hand it over to Brenda, and she'll take it from here.
Thank you very much, Robin. I certainly appreciate it. Welcome, everyone. It's a pleasure to be on the line today. My name is Brenda Torres. I'm an audit partner with Crow. I have 21 years of experience. And to explain a little bit about the visual with the Super Bowl right around the corner, to give you some perspective, I felt like last year I was the quarterback of this process from an external auditor perspective. I'm happy to tell you that I think I've elevated my role to offensive coordinator this year, so I'm certainly excited about that in year 2 of performing these procedures. A little bit about Crow Horwath, if you're not familiar with us. We are the 8th largest firm in the United States. We do have 28 offices nationally, including 4 offices in California, 1 being in Sacramento. As Robin stated several times, we are the external auditor for CalSTRS, but we are the auditor for approximately 100 school districts and other LEAs within the state of California as well. We do specialize in that audit practice. The context of my presentation is really going to focus on the information that Robin provided to you, especially with respect to the additional schedules that CalSTRS engaged Crow to audit, so that you can understand why we are performing these procedures and how those procedures support our audit opinions. I think Robin gave justice to the background of both GASB 67 and GASB 68. So again, these procedures are to support GASB 67 and primarily our audit of the total pension liability disclosed in the financial statements of CalSTRS. In addition to that, the employer audit will serve a dual purpose. In addition to testing the completeness and accuracy of the active member census data that's used by CalSTRS actuary to calculate that total pension liability for the strip, we are also performing additional procedures to gain assurance on eligible compensation that is used to determine state and employer contributions for purposes of opining on the scheduled proportionate share that Robin presented to you. Here's the same schedule Robin provided to you earlier. Just wanted to provide you another graphic so you could understand both the dual purpose. So here again is a representation of the notes in the financial statements that show the total pension liability as well as the net pension liability as a strip. And then additionally, another extract from the actual Schedule 9, the schedule proportionate share that is included in both CalSTRS financial statements and the CAFR. So for purposes of these employer audits, we are taking a sampling approach where we will visit a number of K-12 organizations, community colleges, county offices of education, charter schools to perform these procedures. The sample was selected on, it was done on a sampling basis, completely random based on recommended guidance, and I certainly will go over that with you. And then to talk a little bit about our challenge, so when you think in the context of CalSTRS, the challenge for us as auditors is we needed to consider 3 years of covered payroll. So first we'll talk about the valuation date that Robin spoke to. So CalSTRS uses the beginning of the year valuation date. So for purposes of the 14-15 fiscal year, the valuation date is as of June 30th, 2014. So when I talk about testing census information for purposes of validating the active member census used by CalSTRS actuary, I'm going to be referring to that valuation date and that period of covered payroll. For purposes of the scheduled proportionate share, and a byproduct of that would also be CalSTRS audited financial statements, when you look at how the contributions are determined for the state as well as for the employers, the state contribution is determined based on covered payroll from 2 fiscal year periods previous to the current year. So what that means is you're looking for the fiscal year 1213 for purposes of the state contribution. When you talk about the employer contribution, you're talking about covered payroll for fiscal year 14-15, or the current year that we're in. I know Robin covered this several times, but I can't emphasize enough that the purpose and scope of our audit is strictly to support the audit opinions of both CalSTRS and the scheduled proportionate share and the elements of the scheduled collective pension amount. So this should not be confused with other audits that are performed either by your or the Audit Services Department of CalSTRS, who often visit many of your employers. So the next burning question is, how is my district selected? Robin spoke to the white paper series that was issued by the AICPA State and Local Government Expert Panel. And included within those recommendations was a sampling approach. And that sampling approach really focused on the proportionate share of an individual entity in terms of their covered payroll to the total of covered payroll for all the entities combined. So when you put this into context, you have to remember that Robin showed you the very end of the scheduled proportionate share from last year's financial statements. And when she identified the state's contribution, she made explicit to explain to all of you that that was the on behalf of payment, that did not represent the state as an employer, but rather as a non-employer contributing entity. So for purposes of this, the population is the employers, which would include the state, but only to a very small scale in which they have employees that are participants in CalSTRS. So we employed the sampling methodology that is noted on this slide. Any individually important employers would be selected annually. In those cases, it's recommended that they're selected if 20%, if they're greater than 20% of total covered payroll. Beyond those individually important employers, the methodology is really based on rotation that is contingent upon your side with respect to the total. So for employers that are between 5 and 20% of covered payroll, the recommendation is that you're audited once every 5 years. If you are less than 5% but deemed to be greater than insignificant, and I'll define that in a minute, it's recommended that you're audited once every 10 years. And then within the guidance, it seems to suggest that those employers in the aggregate that were less than 2% of the proportionate share of covered payroll may not be subjected to testing, but I can tell you from an auditor's perspective that everybody needs to be subjected to sampling, and there's also an element of unpredictability in our audit approach. So said differently, CRO is always going to select a sample within that less than 2% in the aggregate. So now I want to talk a little bit about working with CRO and CalSTRS. I would like to introduce you to our new quarterback who's ready for the big game these next several months. This is Ron Gasink. He is the person that worked with me significantly last year as well as with CalSTRS. And really led all of our engagement teams to complete all of the audits that we conducted for this purpose. So Ron has certainly been a leader. You will see his name in this presentation. Some of you may have already corresponded with Ron. He's tried to be very responsive to a lot of the questions that we have received thus far. And actually, I want to go back to one point. When I talk a little bit about the engagement team, one item to note is that each engagement team will be comprised of both CRO and CalSTRS individuals. And for purposes of your audit, the expectation should be that your primary contact person will be the CRO auditor assigned to your district. So although Ron will be involved, he will have a number of people blocking and tackling on his behalf to work through this process. And those questions should be directed to them and not Ron. Now we're going to go through what information you will be asked to provide for purposes of these audits. CalSTRS sent letters to each of you. They were dated December 30th of 2014. What we tried to do is CalSTRS was instrumental in helping us identify what we're referring to as the primary district contact to inform you that your district has been selected in our sample for purposes of the 14-15 CalSTRS audit. The letter instructed the district to reach out to CalSTRS at the CalSTRS GASB project email address if we had not identified the right person. As a byproduct of that letter, we did ask for you to acknowledge the letter by completing what was referred to as Attachment 1, which was just an opportunity to confirm some basic information from all of you relative to the location of your records, the type of payroll system that you use, the types of formats that can be provided with respect to your payroll files, and preferred fieldwork dates. Our intent is to try to conduct all of these audits within about a 5-month period. And I can tell you last year, just due to the timing of the guidance that was released and the availability of information and to get this up and running, we conducted about 100 audits within an 8-week time frame. That was fieldwork only, but it was very time-consuming, labor-intensive, and very challenging to do that. So we certainly want to take an opportunity to use a much greater runway to complete all of this work. How will you know what information you want from Crow? If you have responded with Attachment 1, subsequent to that, you should have received an email from Crow asking you to sign up to use our Crow Information Request Tracker. And I'm going to get into CERT in a few minutes, but what we're trying to do is to develop a secure web-based portal where we can exchange information in a very secure environment, which is just the opportunity for you, the employer, to exchange information directly with Crow, and no other employer that has been selected in our sample would have visibility to your information. I don't know if anybody remembers CERT, but I thought this was kind of a fun visual. But as I talked about, Crow is a web-based tool that we use for all of our external audits within the firm, and it's a way to transmit data in a very secure environment. It's a proprietary system that was developed by Crow, and it really replaces the concept of what I'll refer to as a pre-audit letter or a PBC letter, prepared by client letter. And we use CERT to basically provide our request to you through this portal. There is a feature that allows you to ask questions for each of those requests. And then additionally, to the extent that you have added additional CERT users from your district to assist you in responding to our requests, you do have the ability to mark your response as private so that only the district owner of that CERT request has visibility to that information, while the Crow auditor would have visibility to everything that's been responded to. It's very important to note that due to the nature that we're requesting, we cannot use email to transmit data. We cannot use iCloud to transmit data. It's important that we use the CERT tool in order to transmit this data to make sure that the integrity of the member information is secured. So as I stated previously, we will set up CERT for each of the districts. The primary district contact, like I said, should have received an email already from Crow to register for CERT. If you are on this call and have not registered for CERT, I would ask you that you please email that CalSTRS GASB project email address. Additionally, CERT does help with audit efficiency. It is the way that we post requests and receive information. It enables you to correspond directly with the auditors at a time that's convenient to you because you can post your questions at any time. And then it tracks all of the requests and the status of those requests, allowing both the district and the Crow auditor to monitor progress. and address any issues timely. If you feel like you've responded to the CalSTRS December 30th letter and you've provided attachment 1, but yet you have not received an email from CROW or from CERT or CERT report, I would to check your spam folder. We are aware of a few districts that have not yet registered. I'm obviously not going to go through this now, but to the extent that you're interested, you can certainly use this address to go ahead and view a short demo on our CERT tool. At this point, I'm going to pause and open this up to any questions before we get into the detail of the actual CERT requests themselves.
All right, and as a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press star 1. Be sure to unmute your line and record your first and last name clearly when prompted. Once again, if you have a question, please press star 1 at this time. One moment to see if we have any come up in queue. And we do have a few in queue. One moment while I gather those names. All right, the first question comes from Andrea. Your line is now open.
Should the county office register for the CERT tool, and are we going to be required to send information to you guys?
Andrea, that's a great question. It is intended that the district would sign up for the CERT tool, and to the extent that a district would need to reach out to their county office of education to request information to respond to one of the CROW requests, they may have another mechanism to facilitate that process where they gather the information from you and include that information in their response back to CROW. I believe the system would allow them to set you up as a CERT user if they would like you to attach the information directly. But I think the intent is for the district to take responsibility for their records and to the extent possible provide that information directly from CROW. In some circumstances, they may need your assistance, but I'll tell you last year, the manner in which this worked, we worked directly from a CERT perspective with the district.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Our next question comes from Lucy. Your line is now open.
Thank you. If we are already a CROW client, then do we have to register for CERT twice?
Lucy, that's a great question. If you are already a CROW client, yes, you need to register to be a CERT user for purposes of accessing the portal that's strictly for the CalSTRS audit. So in those such situations, I believe that you will have 2 CERT accesses because the request and response feature is going to be unique to each of those 2 different engagements.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and our next question comes from Margaret. Your line is now open.
Hi, can you just repeat your email address?
Sure can. That email address is CalSTRS GASB Project, so CalSTRS GASB PROJECT at CalSTRS.com.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and our next question comes from Paula. Your line is now open.
Hi, just wanted to clarify if we had a person who's representing our financial division and our payroll division and our HR division, would all 3 of those individuals have to register on CERT?
So we have a term that we use internally called the CERT liaison. So the primary district contact is the person that we believe would originally register as a CERT user, and then that liaison would have the ability to provide other individuals within the district, whether it's financial, payroll, HR, whatever it is, with user access to that system, and then you can hand off certain requests to those individuals so that they can respond directly to CROW. And again, for people that might be in your human resources or payroll departments, to the extent that they need to mark those private upon response, they are welcome to do that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Paula? You're welcome.
Yes, it does.
All right, and our next question comes from Janice. Your line is now open.
Hi, I have a question regarding the information that we're going to have to be uploading to the CERT web-based portal. Are you going to be showing us different samples on exactly how you want us to show the information in like a spreadsheet if we use Excel?
Are you talking, Janice, for purposes of the sample of members that we're selecting for testing, or are you talking about examples as it relates to the payroll report?
The payroll report and the reconciliation. If we use Excel spreadsheet to show you that, are you going to give us samples of how you want all that information formatted?
I will let Ron interject, but I'm going to try to answer your question. I think the thought process is that in many cases, the district may already be performing a reconciliation between their payroll records and their general ledger. So to the extent that you already have a method for doing that, I think our expectation would be that hopefully your method would also meet our expectations. We're not asking for you to duplicate efforts. To the extent that you don't have a methodology that you already use, I think Excel is a great format to use to show that reconciliation, but I don't believe we had intended to require a certain format. And Ron, I'll let you interject if you have anything else to add based on being more in the details last year.
I think that pretty much covers it. We're open to whatever format you may use. If you don't, I think like Brenda said, if you don't have a format, we can certainly talk about, talk through with your Crow auditor the documentation that we would want to see.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm showing no additional questions at this time.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone, for your questions. So if you've had the opportunity to already register on CERT, that means that you already should have access to all of the initial CERT requests. There are 19 of them, and they are all the same for each of the districts with the exception of, obviously, the sample of members that have been selected for testing. So feel free to follow along in CERT if you would like, or if you printed that request earlier, you are welcome to do so. One thing I do want to note for you, if you've had an opportunity to be in CERT, and about in the middle of the screen where it refers to request, owner, prepare, and due date, if you click on the request icon, it will order the CERT in the numbers that correspond with the numbers I'm going to go through here. CERTs number 1 and 2 are fairly basic. They're really just to gather more information about your district, primarily for purposes of key contacts that we may be dealing with for purposes of the audit. For CERT request number 3, we are looking for additional information that's based on how your payroll system is coded for purposes of determining pensionable wages, eligible compensation, whatever term you're most familiar with, for purposes of calculating CalSTRS eligible wages for member contributions and employer contributions. CERT request number 4 is asking for detailed information relative to your payroll register for fiscal year 13-14. So this is really for purposes of auditing the active member census data used to determine the total pension liability. We have provided to you the different formats in the order of preference, meaning that they're easier for Crow to work with if you can provide them in a text file versus, let's say, a print to PDF. Additionally, we are looking for your payroll in total So if you have separate payroll reports for certificated versus classified employees, we would ask that you provide both of those. Now, just to give you some insight into that, it is our responsibility when you're looking at completeness that you don't have employees that should be participating in CalSTRS that have been improperly excluded. So when we get to one of the later cert requests, I think it will resonate with you as to why we've asked for this particular information. Cert request number 5 is the same request as number 4, except for the current fiscal year. And if I am all of you, I'm responding to you saying, well, Brenda, I can't provide this information to you because the fiscal year has not yet ended. One item that I didn't mention at the beginning that I should have is that each of the cert requests has a due date associated with it. And those due dates have been set based on either confirmed fieldwork dates or anticipated fieldwork dates based on your responses in Attachment 1 to that December 2014 letter from CalSTRS. However, in certain circumstances where we are looking for information from the current fiscal year, as the case with request number 5, that due date is going to be, I think it's like mid-July or end of July to respond with this information, acknowledging that we need the fiscal year to end in order for you to be able to provide it. Request number 6 actually relates to one of the questions that we previously discussed during the last Q&A feature. So we are asking for a reconciliation of those same payroll reports that you're providing in the previous cert request to your organization's general ledger. So again, if you already have a format which you use to do that on a regular basis, that should be acceptable to us. If not, I think Excel is a great reconciliation tool. Cert request number 7 is the same request, but for fiscal year 14-15, and again should have a due date of approximately July 15th. For request number 8, there should be a file attached to this request with the sample of members that we selected from CalSTRS Pension Administration System for purposes of testing the accuracy and completeness of the census data. And so then what we're asking for is additional information from all of you to support the dates or information that CalSTRS has in their system, such as dates of birth, gender, dates of termination, if those are applicable. I do want to clarify that a screenshot from your HRIS system would not be considered to be sufficient audit documentation. So we would be looking for something additional to that, such as an employment application or an insurance enrollment form, something that's signed by the employee that provides the necessary information to support those attributes. For cert request number 9, in addition to the items previously mentioned, we are also looking for information to support a member's job classification so that we know that they're actually certificated individuals. Cert request number 10 also applies to that same sample of members. And we are information to support the earned annual salary for fiscal year 13-14. So contracts for their wage authorizations and support for any allowances or any retro pay adjustments that have occurred. We did receive some cert questions up front relative to this item. One of those items was that a district asserted that only their new employees sign contracts. So what would we be requesting if the member that we selected is not a new employee? I guess my only assumption would be that there is a previous contract that's considered an evergreen contract. So we would still want support in the form of that original document or contract. In terms of retro pay adjustments, I would expect that those would be supported by either a board resolution or a union agreement or something of the equivalent. For request number 11, we are also going to be doing some detailed testing for fiscal 14-15. And so for each of the members selected in request 8, we would also like information to support the current year earned annual salary for each of those members to the extent that there has been a change from the previous fiscal year to the current fiscal year, including all of that same information that I previously spoke to. Request number 12. One of the challenges that we've had to work through with respect to the employer audit is the different payroll systems that are used by all of the employers and understanding those payroll systems. And in audit terminology, what we've done is we've taken a non-reliance approach, which means we need to do some additional testing on the reports that you provide in order to place reliance upon them in the aggregate for purposes of our procedures. So in this particular test, for the first member on the file that's attached in cert request number 8, we are asking for additional information from your payroll system for every pay period for that member, and that member only. So not all of the members in our sample, but just one of those members. In addition to that, when you look at request number 8, in the same context of needing to test a payroll report, we've also selected a number of different payroll periods to perform procedures because we're not going to perform the same procedure for the same payroll period for the entire sample selected. So again, we're looking for information that corresponds to the pay period identified in column E of that Excel attachment. For cert request number 14, in addition to the payroll coding as it relates to how you determine pensionable wages or eligible compensation, we would also appreciate if this exists in your system to provide whatever code you use within your system to distinguish an employee as a participant in CalSTRS versus a participant in CalPERS. For request number 15, this should correspond to the comment I made about improper exclusion from CalSTRS. So we will be conducting a test that we'll call a false exclusion testing. So again, this ties into the request asking you to provide information not only for certificated employees, but also classified employees in terms of your entire payroll report so that we can select an additional sample of individuals that are employed by your district but are not participating in CalSTRS to validate that they are properly excluded from such participation. And once we get your payroll reports and we're able to reconcile those, we will be selecting that sample and providing an additional cert request or providing a file to this cert request that will then communicate to you the members that we have selected. And Ron, I see you're IMing me, so you want to talk about the object codes. I don't know if this is a place that you want to do that or if that's something that you wanted to mention earlier, but go ahead and unmute to cover that.
Yeah, I was referencing cert request number 14, so one slide prior to this. We're looking for information to differentiate a CalSTRS creditable compensation from CalPERS creditable compensation. So many of you, I'm sure, use like 1,000, 2,000 object codes where, just because someone's in a 1,000 object code position doesn't necessarily mean that they're participating in CalSTRS. So that doesn't necessarily mean that those wages are CalSTRS eligible wages. So we want to try and get something different than that if your system can provide that. And if not, that's something that we're going to need to talk about on a district-by-district basis with your CRO auditor, or if you can identify that ahead of time, and if you want to post a question within CERT about that you can't provide anything other than that, or if you want to talk about what you can provide, put that question in CERT, and either your CRO auditor or myself or another manager on the CRO side will contact you to talk through what you have and what we can use.
Thank you, Ron. CERT request number 16. Prior to fieldwork, we will be attaching a file, so there's currently not an attached file to this request. But as a byproduct of trying to start the employer audits earlier, and with recognition of the dual purpose that we're trying to achieve by conducting these procedures, we are taking an approach where we are going to be testing a sample of remittances that you've submitted to CalSTRS that would then reconcile to the information that is in the, I think it's called the contribution portal, the client account portal through CalSTRS Secure Employer website. So we will be getting information from CalSTRS, selecting a sample, that sample to you, and then be asking for your supporting records as noted in CERT request number 16 so that we can test at a remittance level. So this is just a different picture that corresponds to something Robin communicated earlier when she demonstrated the client account portal and how to access it and what that information may look like. This would be the information that we would be requesting from CalSTRS and then ask for your supporting records that would correspond to the amounts that they have recorded. For request number 17, we are just identifying for all of you for the sample of remittances that will be selected and attached in 16, the different information that we will need. And it is very similar to what we're doing for 13-14, but it's at a payroll, or I'm sorry, it's at a remittance basis versus for the entire year. So the same types of files and the same reconciliations to your general ledger. Request number 18, I'm sorry, 18 is where we're covering the reconciliation between those payroll registers or payroll reports to the expense recorded in your general ledger. Got ahead of myself. And then 19, we're just looking for a copy of your audited financial statements as well, so we can get comfortable with some of the general ledger information that you provided for 13-14. Like I stated earlier, there is a question and answer feature within CERT. I do encourage you to use it. Many districts have already started using it. We've received a number of questions, and I hope that we are responding timely to you. We are going to open up this briefly for questions, but I will tell you that we're probably limited to about 5 to 7 minutes so that we can end the presentation on time. So therefore, if you have a question that you would like submitted that you think would be helpful to the entire group, I again encourage you to use that CalSTRS GASB project email address, and we would be happy to accumulate all of your questions and provide answers to each of those questions and then get them back to this group for visibility to that Q&A. And with that, go ahead and open the line for the next 5 to 7 minutes for questions, please.
Excuse me, we do have a question in queue. Let's see here. The question comes from Carrie. Your line is now open.
Hi.
I was just wondering how or when we will find out when our audit date will be.
Oh, Ron, you're the master scheduler, so I'm going to let you respond to that. So if you could please respond to Carrie, that would be great.
Sure. So the process that we're working through, when you responded with attachment 1 that Brenda referenced earlier, you put in a preferred date or month, and in some cases multiple months. So we are working through the scheduling process now based on those months that you requested. February is full at this point, and March is, so we've scheduled all of February. March through June, we have a tentative schedule, and we are calling districts on, starting with March, and we'll work through the rest of through June. So if you received a request from CalSTRS to provide additional availability, that means that whatever months that you had originally provided on attachment 1 are full at this point. So if you did not receive that email, then we are trying to accommodate your request. But you will be getting a phone call based on, like I said, starting with March and moving on.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we do have another question from Paula. Your line is now open.
Hi. I'm after going through this webinar. Ours is scheduled for the week of February. Let's see. I'm sorry. It just got scheduled last week at the latter part of the week to February 17th through the 20th, and I'm with Poway Unified School District. We'll have to have all of this ready for you before you come to your on-site, correct?
That would be our preference, correct.
Because we were asking for as far out as we could possibly have because we're going through the PeopleSoft conversion and preparing for that. So I don't know what platform I take that up with because that's also a recess period. So.
Have you previously talked to someone within Crow, Paula?
Yes. No, not within Crow. It was with CalSTRS, and her name was Karen, F-U-N-G. I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Oh, was it Kathy?
Yes, and she was getting a hold of you guys because I was concerned, and apparently you had arranged for both of you, CalSTRS and yourself, to come out and get the audit done within that time frame. But after seeing all this information, plus the information CalSTRS is doing for their audit, I don't know if I could conceivably, with our financial group, get it done. I was also concerned because a lot of people are going to be off that week because it is a recess period because we have President's Day off. We have a district holiday on that Friday. So, I mean...
Okay.
So, Brenda, I'm going to interject here and say that this is one of those things that we probably should take offline. Yeah. So, good point.
Yeah, we will reach out to you, Paula. I think we have your contact information, or we'll get it directly from Kathy, and we'll be reaching out to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm sure no additional questions.
I think we may have time. Okay, great, because I was going to cut it off, so thank you. Okay, so next steps and expectations, if you have an idea. Again, registration is very, very important. So not only getting access, but then reviewing the cert requests as well as the samples that have been selected and provided within those requests. Crow will be contacting the primary district contact to confirm fieldwork dates for on-site testing. As we alluded to in this presentation, please discuss any questions that you have regarding the pre-audit information with your Crow lead. Any additional questions as appropriate, we'd be happy to respond to those. And again, please use that Q&A feature that we provide within CERT. As stated earlier, each district will be visited by a team of at least one Crow auditor and one CalSTRS employee or auditor. In most cases, perhaps not all, but in probably 99% of the cases, the auditors visiting your district will be solely focused on purposes of the testing related to the census information and credible compensation for purposes of GASB 67, as well as the scheduled proportionate share. We expect that for most districts, the on-site portion of our field work will last approximately 2 days. In some cases, it might be 3. For a very large district, we will schedule all week. I think to some of Paula's points, so I certainly appreciate her question. We just ask that you be prepared for our on-site field work by having all of the information that we've requested available for the auditors upon arrival. We've got a very tight timeline with trying to manage approximately 100 employer audits within this period, allowing for timely completion of each of these audits. So that means following up with any open items or any differences to make sure we can close those issues timely. Please be available for confirmed dates of field work. So individuals from your organization within the financial department, payroll, human resources, or that might just be one person who does all of those roles, but we just ask that you be available to us to answer questions. We'll be sensitive to your day job, and we'll try not to bombard you the entire time that we're there, but so that we can work quickly through the information, would ask that you make yourself accessible as much as possible. We ask that you adhere to the assigned due dates within CERT. If you have concerns over those, please let us know. Those dates, again, correspond with this big matrix that we have going for scheduling purposes and should align with either your confirmed or anticipated fieldwork dates. Again, provide support documentation, and then just, again, provide assistance to understanding any year-to-year variances with payroll totals as we try to reconcile those back to CalSTRS records. We also ask that your regular business hours be communicated when we confirm fieldwork so that we have a good understanding of those business hours. We also ask that internet access be provided during fieldwork and that you have a dedicated workspace to accommodate 2 to 3 auditors, keeping in mind that we will be dealing with confidential and sensitive information like payroll and personnel data. So I would ask that you keep that in mind as you identify workspace. And I will pause here for just a few minutes for any additional questions.
We did have one comment in queue from Mill. Your line is now open. Caller, your line is open.
Okay. Here's my question. Where do we get the proportionality report? That's one. And also, do we get a chance to print this PowerPoint presentation?
So I'll take those.
Thank you, Robin.
The PowerPoint will be posted on CalSTRS.com under employers, and then we have a section called GASB accounting changes. So we'll post it out there. In terms of the schedule of proportionate share, our comprehensive annual financial report is posted under publications on CalSTRS.com. If you go to the fiscal year 13-14 report, starting on page 93, you will see the separate auditor's opinion and then schedules 9 and 10 and the notes. And that is PDFs that you could save and print.
Okay, we're here in the search screen.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand you. Could you repeat that?
Okay, the report that you are just talking, the publication. So I'm here on CalSTRS.
Oh, on CalSTRS.com. Again, would you send me an email and I'll send you a link. So my email is rmadsen, M-A-D-S-E-N, @CalSTRS.com, and I'll send you a link.
Okay, we'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm showing no additional questions at this time.
Great, thank you. And I'm going to wrap up the presentation fairly quickly in the essence of time. There is information also available on CRO's website. It is not unique to CalSTRS, but we do have a feature where you can sign up for CRO e-communications for certain publications that you might be interested in. There is a Government Advantage series that includes a number of either brochures or previous webcasts that you can view at your leisure. CRO did conduct a 6-part series about GASB 67 and 68. Each of those webinars, if you did not have an opportunity to participate, they were recorded and are available on our website. So I wanted to bring that to your attention to the extent you feel it might be helpful to you as you adopt GASB 68. In addition to that, here is some CRO contact information. My contact information is at the top. Ron's contact information is at the bottom. The gentleman in the middle, his name is Jeff Jensen. He is a partner in our Sacramento office. He does assist with the CalSTRS audit, but his primary focus is actually being the signing partner on district audit. So he does specialize in your industry, and any questions, you can also feel free to reach out to Jeff. From a CalSTRS perspective, I think Robin just provided her email address, but it's also included in this presentation. Additionally, Art Martinez is the CalSTRS Financial Services Director. Many questions, I think, specific to the Scheduled Proportionate Share are being directed to him. And then this is the GASB project email address that we've referred to several times throughout this presentation. Here's that email address for any of your questions that you may have with respect to this presentation and related topics. With that, we'll pause for any additional questions, and if not, then I'll turn it over to Robin for a quick close. Again, I appreciate your time and your attention to this matter. We certainly look forward to working with you and appreciate you working with us, your flexibility and patience as we work through these audits.
So I just want to add my thanks for taking your time to attend this webinar. We will post a recording of it. In addition, we will publish another date and time for another iteration of this webinar. For those of you who have attended this one, what we do in the next cycle will be the same, so no need for you to attend it, but we do want to make it available as we had requests exceeding our capacity for today. So if you are talking to peers who didn't get an opportunity to participate, we will be publishing a date and time sometime in the middle of February for a subsequent webinar. We'll post that on SO. We'll also try and get it on our .com site. So thank you again.